Hey, everybody, real quick before we get into one of the most entertaining distillery tours you'll probably ever see on this show with Sandstone Distillery, I want to do a real quick review of the movie Bright from Will Smith. It's a Netflix exclusive, but I really dreaded this movie. The previews made it look horrible, so maybe it was because the bar had been lowered so much, but I gotta say that it wasn't near as bad as I thought. It wasn't great. I thought it was going to be kind of a watered-down version of the Dresden Files, but it turned out to be its own thing. And despite they work way too hard at shoving the soundtrack down your throat, I think they needed to chill out on that a little bit, let the movie do the talking. But other than that, it was not bad. It's definitely worth a view. The CGI on it is very it brings you in as opposed to kind of making you realize it's cheap CGI. It's very well done. It's its own original story. I do recommend it. Bright. It's on Netflix. It's got Will Smith, and it's urban fantasy. Could have been better, but it was not as bad as I thought. So, anyways, here we are with the tour of Sandstone Distillery.
Welcome to another episode of Nerds Drink Whiskey. We are nearing the end of our distillery tour, where we've gone to many distilleries within the Northwest, Puget Sound area, and we are ending it at a distillery that is very close to our studios in Olympia, Lacey, Washington, and this is Sandstone Distillery. They're in Tenino. It's a good long farm drive away from us, but I think past the Bull for Sale sign, and but the owner here is going to give us a quick tour of their place and how they make their product. So I'm going to hand this off to you and put you in charge.
Okay, we're here to go. Now, is this the right spot? I'm supposed to hold it in the right place and everything. You got to do it right or don't do it at all. So, yeah, it was kind of fun because, when people come up here, they say you were in Tenino. Well, we're kind of in the Beverly Hills of Tenino, which is halfway between Tenino and Tumwater, which is kind of a beautiful place to be. It's a beautiful drive coming up here. It feels like a long way the first time out. If you start to hear banjos halfway up the road, you know you're getting close. So, come on over here. A little bit closer here, and we will talk about what we actually do. See, we are a grain-to-glass distillery. We make everything from scratch. If we, it's one of those things where we're going to hang a sign out one of these times to where it says, every drop that goes out of the door is made right here, which is important to us. We're a bit of a traditionalist in that way, that we make it all ourselves. So what we do is we start off with grain. Looks like this. That's soft winter wheat right out of the combine. We start 100% with that, and also barley grown right down in the Chehalis Valley, not far away. We want to grind it up. So we'll throw it into, if you want to look up at that hopper up there with the red legs, that's the hopper where we'll throw our 500 pounds of grain in. And it's a mixture of this, that, and the other thing as far as grains go. We'll hold that thing above this with a forklift and let gravity do all the work. Gravity never seems to break down. It falls down into here, gets ground up, it spits out into a great big bag that looks like this. So this is kind of a fluffy, grits-looking stuff. Well, we grind that grain for the same reason you grind up coffee. Now, you wouldn't make coffee out of whole beans. That'd be dumb. And, you grind it up so you get more surface area and you get more flavor profiles that way. And so if you look close at that wheat, it kind of looks like a coffee bean. Well, we grind it up for the same reason. We want more flavor extraction. And so as we grind it up, we're also heating up our water at the same time. Now, everybody never used to buy coffee in a can. It used to be before Starbucks, and still do, some of us. But you open up that can back in the day, and it would make that noise. And it was so fresh because it was vacuum-packed freshness and all that type of stuff. The first pot of coffee was really, really delicious. Well, by the time we got halfway through that can, it wasn't so great anymore. It was stale. It had oxidized. It just didn't taste that great. But you finished it because it was still coffee. Now, you can still make whiskey out of stale grain, but it's not as good, in my opinion anyway, as coffee or grain that's freshly ground to make your whiskey. So while it's grinding, we're also heating up our water at the same time. Now, these guys over here, these totes, you can see that they're industrial shipping totes is what they were. There's nothing really special about them. They have the legs at the bottom. They would fit into these little ears up here, so for stacking, for warehousing, and things like this. And they were used for shipping like molasses, maple syrup, and stuff like that. Well, we converted them into cookers as well. See, actually, we do it wrong around here. You're supposed to mash your grains in this one tank, and then you lauter the grains out, and you got this sugar water, and then you pump that into a fermenter where you ferment, and then you dump that out of there to the fermenter into your still, and you do the stripping run, and etc. Well, what we do is we have a tank back in the back. It's hard to see behind all the junk, but underneath of that thing, we built a firebox, and we put a 400,000 BTU burner under there, like a turkey cooker, and it causes the water to boil. Now, as the water boils, it makes steam. The steam comes out through this line arm here down to this manifold here that has 3 holes. Well, this one has 3 holes. That one has 3 holes. So this line arm can reach around to either one of these 3 totes from this one spot. Now, we'll have these pipes in, say, this one. We'll have the manifold sitting there. It'll have this motor on it, and the pipes will go all the way down to the bottom, and then they angle over like this, where the bubbles start to escape. So now we've got hundreds and hundreds of little steam bubbles that are working their way to the surface, dissipating their heat as they go. So that's how we're effectively oxygenating the water just a little bit and causing some convection, thermodynamics, where heat wants to rise, the cold wants to go down, it's starting to stir it a little bit, but not enough to really get stirred up, because we got 500 pounds of grain in here. So we'll have this motor that stirs it all up. We bring it up to the right temperature. We start to convert the starches of the grains into sugars, and then we once we get that converted, we cool it down, throw in our yeast, and it starts to ferment. And so it'll ferment in here for about 6 days. When it's all done, the next step is to remove the alcohol from the beer. Basically, we get about a 8-9% beer. It's not super high, but it's pretty good. Well, rather than having a Oh, nope. The one thing we don't get from Washington is our yeast, as a matter of fact. It comes from Belgium. I like a Manhattan, and the first yeast we used made a nice vodka, but when we distilled it as a whiskey instead, it did not make a nice Manhattan. I mean, not all whiskeys make nice Manhattans. It's just a fact of life. Well, if I go broke around here, I want cases and cases of Manhattan mix on hand, because I'm really, really going to need it. So we searched and searched. We did about 25 different yeast strains that we tried until we finally find this one from Belgium that made a real nice whiskey yeast. So that's the one we used. So now we've got all this beer in here. We need to separate the alcohol from all the solids that are in here. And if we put a flame underneath this thing, it will scorch those things. First time I ever made a batch, I did that. I just took my wort and grains and all, dumped it into the still, lit the fire, and it turned into a big chunk of charcoal in there. It tasted like a rubber tire. It was horrible. But this, what happens is, we put the pipes back in, and that's our heat source, is all these little bubbles. Now think about it. If you had an ear of corn, and you put an ear of corn on a barbecue, it burns. It turns black and, burns up. But if you take that same ear of corn, throw it in boiling water, well, now it just cooks now, doesn't it? So it doesn't scorch. So what we do is we put the pipes back in, and then we change the lids. So each of these lids are all interchangeable. They're all the same. So our cooker becomes a fermenter. We change the lid, we put this on, and now our cooker that was a fermenter is now a pot still. And that's how we distill off. So what happens is we heat up that beer, and it agitates all the grains and gets them all slurrying around until they start to vaporize the alcohol. The alcohol vapor makes its way up through this pipe and around to this condenser, which condenses the vapor back into a liquid, and that's how we end up with our stripping run. Now, our stripping run is this gray, nasty-looking water-looking stuff. It looks like something out of the gray water tank of your RV or something like that. It's about 60 proof. It's not really high. It's all the good, the bad, and the ugly and everything. It needs to be refined in order to make a good whiskey. And you ever hear about, you ever see the old pots that have the X's on them? 3 X's? And that was good whiskey? Well, back in the 1600s, people weren't literate, and they didn't know how to write. And so when it was distilled once, they put an X on there. And then when it was distilled twice, there was a second X on there. When it had 3 X's, then you had a good drinkable whiskey or something to put in a barrel to age. So anyway, that's why it was done. That's the old school way, and that's kind of the way we do our barreling whiskey, is we 3-time pot distill it. We'll have 3 of these barrels of 60 proof. We'll take all 3 of them, we'll put them back into the pot still. I suppose I should be looking at the camera instead of at everybody else, but there's never people all around here, so I'm just doing it as we go. So anyway, we'll take those 3 barrels of 60 proof, we'll put them back into the pot still. We'll redistill it, and we'll end up with 2 barrels of about 90 proof. Then we take those 2 barrels of 90 proof, we throw them back in, distill them one more time, we'll end up with 1 barrel of about 125 proof, and that's what goes into the cask to age. Now, when we're going to make a vodka or a gin or the white whiskey, we bring them over to these 2 guys. Now, this is Hark, and this is Harold. They were soup kettles on a Navy ship back in the 70s. And they were powered by steam, because that was the power on the boats back then. And they had 2 walls in there where the steam would flow. So in order for these to operate properly, you need about 20 pounds of pressure for that steam in order for them to work. Well, the little old homemade boiler over there puts out about half of a pound. I mean, there's no way it was going to work. And so what we had to do is figure it out, which was, one, we could buy a boiler. Well, boilers are expensive, and used boilers are scary. I mean, you've had a bad day with a used boiler. You've had a very, very bad day, maybe your last day. And then there's also these harsh chemicals you got to use for knocking off the scale. And the biggest part was, I didn't get in trouble, but L&I oversees boilers. And the last thing I want to see is L&I in my shop, or OSHA, or any of those acronyms that are in here inspecting you all the time. There's enough inspections as it is. So what we did is, the jacketed area where the steam would flow, we filled it with cooking oil, like fry oil for French fries, things like this. And inside these gray boxes down here are heating elements that are actually out of a hot water heater. The elements heat the oil surrounds the bath, and now we've got a cooker again without any high pressure, without any harsh chemicals, without any L&I coming around, and it's a win-win-win for everybody. As we heat it back up, the alcohol will make its way up this pipe, and there's these little, come on in here and take a look at this. They're these little sieve-looking type of things. And the alcohol will hit that sieve and condense. As the heavier alcohols will condense and fall down, the higher alcohols push their way up. This thing was operating a while ago. We'll have to have you back sometime, but they'll actually look like a lava lamp that's kind of, tweaking out. It's just going like crazy because it'll be about that deep in alcohol, bubbling away. The bubbles are the higher alcohol vapors making their way up. On the underside of this same plate, it'll look like rain dribbling down. Those are the heavier alcohols falling back down. So that's where you get that interchange to where it's getting a higher and higher and higher proof as it goes up. Now this section here is full of this copper mesh. It looks like this stuff right here. There's a ton of it in there. If you look inside of this piece, that's what it looks like down in there. See, copper's super important. It removes off flavors from alcohol vapor. And that's the stuff you want to get rid of because you want to drink something that's nice, not something that tastes like turpentine. So this section here, basically, for lack of a better term, scrubs that out of those flavors out to make it taste better. Then it goes through all the rest of them plates, around the horn and down to here. It comes off on 190 proof, which is your grain-neutral spirit or your vodka, or your what you call Everclear. But because it goes through so much copper, it's a much cleaner, nicer, more pleasant one. Now, when we make our gin, we do a vapor infusion for gin. We take our little baggies like this, and really the only reason we use these little baggies is easier to clean up, because if you threw just your botanicals inside your gin basket, it gets stuck in the little holes and stuff. So we throw in everything from juniper to coriander to cubeb and everything else in the thing to have those vodka vapors work their way up and draw the flavors off. Now, anybody ever have a vodka or a gin that's just like, wow, that is not a very good gin? I swear I've had some once in a while. I won't mention anybody, but yet it tastes like they put their hand in a lawnmower bag and just draw out whatever was in that bag, and that's what went in the baggies up in there because it drew through. And when you have a sip of that gin, you think, do you have a big dog in your yard? Something like that? I'm sorry. No, I'm not. That's how we make our gins and our vodkas. Our whiskeys come in this one. It's a smaller column, so it allows more flavors to come over. The proof is lower, and that's just the difference between the two. The only difference between vodka and whiskey is the proof that it comes off. If you take a whiskey and distill it up at 190 proof, it is now a vodka. If you take a brandy or wine or fruit and you distill it to 190 proof, now it's a vodka. Or rum, same thing. It's just the different proof that designates what it is, what kind of spirit it is. Cool, huh? The things you know. Knowledge is power. So over here, we have our big pot. This is a milk condensing machine that was built in 1949. It is the coolest old pot. I don't know if you can see the hand hammer marks in this thing, but this thing was worked down at the IP Callison Mint Factory from 1949 to 1973. Well, they put in 2,000 gallons of milk in it, when it would, that was designed to. They boil the milk. The milk could be brought up into this section where it would be washed down by a spray cone, getting rid of the vapors. So what was left in the pot was your evaporated or condensed milk. Well, we're going to put in 2,000 gallons of beer. So what goes up into this section here will be alcohol vapors, where it will condense and we'll collect our bourbons and our whiskeys in the future. But I'm getting down to time, aren't I? Am I getting down there close? Well, anyway, this thing, it never produced milk, and it never produced mint either. It was at the mint factory. I thought, mint, bourbon, mint juleps. I thought, God, what a great story this is going to be. Well, it processed cascara bark. And cascara bark is a tree that only grows in the Northwest. That used to be called the chittim tree or the shittim tree, depending on which tribe you were from, because the Indians would use it as a laxative. You chew on it, and it would clean you right out. Well, that's how these guys started down there. People used to peel this bark, and then they would take it down to callus, and it'd be dried out. They would grind it up, put it inside this, and they would condense it like you condense the milk. So when they boiled the water off, the slurry that came out was dried to a powder, which was a pharmaceutical-grade laxative. Yeah, well, there went my fine story, right? Yeah, if my minty fresh story was all shot to pieces, but we know exactly what we're going to tell people. This pot makes damn good shit. That's what it makes. So that is the future of the distillery where we're going. What we'll be filling, right now we make about 1 to 2 barrels a month. This one will make 10 barrels in one pass. So that's kind of the future where things are coming from. So, let's head off over to the history part. Do you want to start the drinking part? Or do you want to cut right here and then go to another part?
Well, I gotta say, now you were talking about, I could edit out what I wanted, right? Well, here's the problem with that. That was one of the most entertainment segments we've had. I ain't editing squat, but we're gonna come back. Well, there's the magic solution. So we're going to cut right here, and we're going to come back next week and try some of their great product. See you next week. Before we go, we got to give away a $5 Amazon gift certificate. Do you mind helping me on that?
I can help you on that.
Okay, so this episode on our Facebook page. Okay, I post this episode on Facebook page. You go to our Facebook page, see this episode, and if you make the first comment that includes the code word that he's about to give, the first comment with the code word he's about to give, I give you a $5 Amazon gift certificate. Does that sound like a deal? All right, so could you tell him what's the code word?
Barley.
Barley.
Because Barley's my dog. Yeah, that's why.
My dog's name is Awesome.
Awesome. That's an awesome possum.
Yeah. So see you next week for more about Nerds Drink Whiskeys.
Yeah, and like dogs.
Yeah, and like dogs.